Bianachan, blessings, women, and welcome back to Bridge. Today I want to talk about the F word, feminism, and what that means to us today. We all are feeling it. The planet we currently wake up to every day, ecologically, politically, socially, structurally, culturally, is, as Charles Eisenstein recently stated, the result of a distorted masculinity, a world-destroying machine that has become completely unmoored from life. But to be very clear, this is not about men. This is about the anti-feminine. So how did we get here? The first ripple came when our ancestors slowly shifted from a nomadic hunter-gatherer lifestyle to an agrarian one. With the advent of farming, tribes no longer followed their food sources, they created them. With more stationary communities came larger settlements in which people began to claim their own land, and therefore, as a result, accumulate possessions and wealth. With larger settlements came the need for social structure, and with the need for social structure came the implementation of hierarchies. With property to protect and now competing power dynamics at play, co-communal living gave way to the onslaught of war. Warriors became trained in stoic obedience for there to be order during battle, and upon victory were rewarded for their unquestioning compliance, and they were rewarded with the spoils of their enemies' villages. Women and land became prizes in the game of warfare. Ownable, usable, conquerable, disposable. This violation emasculated rivals out of their failed roles of providers and protectors of the sanctity and sovereignty of women in the community. To be victorious, however, was to be elevated to a hero, to a god. It shed men of moral accountability based on territory, culture, race, and religion, making it all too easy to satiate desire by entitling themselves to that which had once belonged to or been denied them by the enemy. Men gained access to the bodies of women and the body of the earth as payment, rendering us into an expendable commodity, into an it rather than a her. Becoming a thing meant that earth lost her animacy and woman lost her humanity. She became an object, unfeeling, unthinking, and therefore unworthy, which is the only possible mindset that would have made her pillaging and plundering, her ravage and rape in any way conceivable. And so began the power over of the patriarchy, in which domination is accepted only if that which is being dominated is culturally viewed as lesser than. This is a sentiment the church would eventually capitalize on with its anti-feminine creed that woman was second in creation, but first to sin, and for that must serve, slave, suffer, and submit in silence. This sentiment reached its height during the witch hunts in Europe, the attitude towards women being best summarized by a statement by the co-conspiring Prince Bishop of Würzburg, Germany, who said that man's greatest misfortune was to have been born from woman's stinking private parts. This isn't just an anti-feminine mindset, this is anti-life. And it has led human beings to becoming the only species on the planet that systematically destroys its own habitat, of which it is inextricably a part of. By making the body of woman inferior was to make that of the earth also, and the two together a crime. all earth-based or pagan practices which centered around the pre-Christian European animist worship of the earth as feminine, as goddess, as womb, in its ever-cycling seasonal rites and rhythms, were therefore forbidden, deemed heretical, demonic, and immoral. So, in other words, with a cultural significance backed up by a following that stretched back millennia, paganism posed a particular threat to the power, and therefore authority and control, of not just the church, but the institution of patriarchy, intrinsic to its own hierarchy. And so any form of worship other than that prescribed by the church was therefore exclusively tied to the feminine and became damning to be associated with. Because within the cultural sphere of women, midwives and healers shared a knowledge base of skill and practice passed down through earth-honoring traditions. They were specifically targeted by the church for the dependence and thus influence on their communities. And so a vilified version of women as witch became contrived and proceduralized entirely by the church for the sole purpose of accusing, charging, and sentencing learned, leading, and therefore transgressing women to death. The term witch also acted as a form of social weaponry against any who might dare to associate with or share customs with a witch. The propaganda of Pope Innocent VIII's Malleus Maleficarum, which means hammer of the witches, and Bouchard of Worms' Corrector, not only served to justify the racket of hate crimes, but to further indoctrinate a culture of fear throughout Europe. In quotations, Swawicken Tjoched, that is the Anglo-Saxon of as the witches teach, which referenced the animist wisdom ways of the past, that therefore became a death sentence, literally. Our current dominant culture in North America is based on the methodologies colonial Europeans brought with them. This means that even today, according to the Battered Women Support Services, in quotes, violence against women and the land has been designed and maintained through government law, policy, and action, end quote. On a global scale, The Guardian reports that droughts, floods, extreme weather, infectious disease, and food and water insecurity disproportionately affect global women and the world's 1.3 billion poor, the majority of whom are female. To further expand on our current climate crisis, it has been shown that higher rates of assault against women exist in communities where the highest rates of assault against the earth exist. So, in areas of rigorous development and intensive resource extraction, where outside corporations have no sense of belonging to the land or its ancestral traditions, nor personal accountability to local women and their experience of being female. This is the witch wound, and it is pervasive in all forms of power over in our society. It is racism, misogyny, xenophobia, homophobia, transphobia, ageism, classicism, capitalism, religious intolerance, and that which attempts to diminish and destroy diversity, to other, oppress, enslave, and divide. To paraphrase Charles Eisenstein once again, the goal of feminism cannot be to gain equal status in this world-destroying machine. So, knowing, as we've said before, that no problem can be solved from the mindset that created it, how do we move from the linear back into the nonlinear? From exclusive to inclusive, from the individual to relational, from uniformity to diversity, from disposability to sustainability, from discriminative to intuitive. In other words, how do we shift into a feminine mindset that also holds space for not the hypermasculine we've come to know, but the sacred masculine we have come to have lost? And my answer to that for now is we come to it from a posture of humility, literally. The root of the word humility is humus, which means earth. And so humility is to remember that we are of the earth. The way back to this ancient memory is through the body, through the feminine qualities of the senses and sensation that arise from our connection with the greater body of the feminine, with nature herself. Yogini Uma Dinsmore Thule reminds us, in quotes, people who listen to the needs of their bodies are actually listening to the earth, end quote. Once we start touching into what has been dominated or dismissed for millennia, it can be overwhelming to come into contact with the generations of ancestral trauma that have armored the body through enclosure. And so we hold fear in front of us so it doesn't dictate our behavior, as Brené Brown encourages us to do, right? We hold fear in front of us. Otherwise, we do run the risk of reverting back to what is familiar and predictable, back to the patriarchy. We may also feel a simultaneous urgency and hopelessness with the seeming impossibility of creating any meaningful, effectual change in the brokenness of the system we're under. So ask yourself, what is mine to do? Given your circumstances, given your resources, given your skills, what is yours to do? Is it to donate, volunteer, advocate, demonstrate, lead, revolutionize? Moment to moment, day to day, month to month, year to year, what is yours to do? You do not have to solve the problems of the world. You just have to commit to the actionable changes that are yours to make. And the first for all of us to do is to heal the earth by healing our relationship with her through the body. That is how we can reimagine the nonlinear, how we can reimagine inclusivity, community, diversity, sustainability, and intuition back into the world. For, to quote Grandma Kaariina, when women are healthy, the world is healthy. So let's start first with an embodiment practice before we leave into this world and bring an eco-feminine attitude towards our encounters throughout the day with the kidneys. So the kidneys are also associated with the ears and the bladder. No surprise with the urinary bladder there. And they are the water element. Women have long been associated with the water element, especially with the relationship water and the moon have together, and how that is intrinsic to our cycles of the womb, whether you have a womb or not. We are still cyclical beings. So we're going to do a kidney practice here right now, and we start first by rubbing the hands together. So rubbing the hands, and then placing the palms of the hands on the kidneys. If you can't reach the hands and arms back alongside the body, just below or sort of around the lower rib region and into the lumbar area of the low back, then you can always radiate the hands from the front of the body towards the kidneys. So we all have different shoulders. We need to accommodate that. And close your eyes if it's comfortable for you, with the hands, the warm hands, just making some gentle contact with the low back. And scan here for any damp, stagnant energy of fear, contraction, isolation, or loneliness. And then when you're ready, from a traditional Chinese medicine perspective, a Taoist stance, we draw healing blue light into the low back to meet our touch. And we exhale from the kidneys down and out through the sit bones, pubic bone, the tailbone, coccyx, into the earth. Inhale, healing blue light into the low back, into the kidneys. Feel them expand like lungs. Deep ocean blue light. And exhale down and out through the pelvic bowl. We can expand this practice a little bit. So now with each ocean blue inhale, you can draw in feelings of trust and equanimity. Exhaling, letting go of any residue that prevents that expansion from happening. Continuing with that practice and finishing with 3 breaths of the healing sound for the kidneys in traditional Chinese medicine and Taoism, which is the CHOOOO sound. It sounds a lot like the surf breaking on the beach, I find. So inhaling, healing blue light into the low back. Exhaling, just a very soft articulation of the breath. Do that twice more. Releasing the hands from the kidneys, giving them just a little shake, and then extending out from the low back, the palms face towards the earth. Relax your shoulders, make sure your elbows are soft. And this is water position. And we just bring gentle attention to the kidneys here and sense the presence of those deep healing ocean waters washing over the kidneys here. And ask yourself again from this place of connection, what is mine to do? What is mine to do? And you can stay here or soften your way back into presence. Bone to bone, blood to blood, limb to limb, thus be they fitted together. Thank you for joining me here today. Bionakchen, blessings, women.